It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It's an important day today. Today is National Voter Registration Day. Hope you checked your voter registration. Hope you registered yourself. Hope you registered someone. Make sure you registered to vote. Kind of an important period we're in. Make sure friends, make sure family, make sure strangers are registered to vote. Make sure that if you got married, you changed your name, you changed your registration, especially in states that do that whole, you got to have everything on your license matching exactly everything on your registration, because there will be people scrutinizing. If you turned 18, by all means, all that stuff. Make sure your registration's up to date, because the anti-voting people, the ones who whined and complained that they lost, they will be checking. And look, this is an important election, and I've been saying this for a while, and I say this every election cycle. Every election is important. We go through this song and dance. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Oh my goodness, this is it. I think these next two really are. I think this one and the 2024 presidential election, I think these are probably going to be the most important elections of our lifetimes, because it's no longer about just simply the red pill or the blue pill. It's no longer about this policy or that policy. It's about, will we have a democracy? Will we have people in elected office who really truly honor the sanctity of the ballot box, do have some idea of what the principles of this country were until they ripped it down. And as I've been saying, we're at a crossroads moment, and I've made this argument for a while that I feel we're at this kind of really an ideological moment, much like when I was a kid back. I think about 1980 a lot. Because, I was a young kid. I'm looking at the future, the possibilities of what could be. You had Jimmy Carter, who was talking about, people being responsible and people conserving energy and moving us in a technological direction, putting solar panels on the White House and, a different direction. And then you had Reagan, who said, no, we don't need that. We're just going to basically the 1980 version of drill, baby, drill. Which here we are all these years later, having basically invented the technology that the rest of the world has moved so far ahead of us on, that I think we're in a moment. We're in a moment where if we make the wrong choice, as we did, I believe, back in 1980, the country will continue down this path of division, of Hunger Games kind of winners and losers. And it's not the kind of legacy I want to leave for future generations. Now, the reason I say this is I think we're in this kind of moment. And the reason that we're doing this Working Class Heroes tour coming up at the end of the month and into October is because I believe that, you think about when the MAGA folks, when Trump was talking about making America great, you ask any of those people, when do you think we were great as a country? When was that moment where you go, hey, yeah, that's what we aspire to be. We want to return to that moment. Most every one of the red hat folks will say, the 50s and 60s. Now, some of them will say, because, those people knew their place. We had good traditional value. You're going to have that. But the mass of people you talk to, they talk about working class prosperity. They talk about, the kind of Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry kind of towns that we had, and, the good union jobs that could support a family on one wage. Then you could take vacations, and you had a car in the driveway and a chicken in every pot, and you know the lore. You've seen the mental image of the Norman Rockwell era that was the 1950s and 60s. Now, was it that way for everybody? No, it was not. There were people who were definitely left out of this, and you have to fully understand that that was the reality of the time. But there are people who pine for that era, and there are communities that cling to that past pride, that they used to be the people who built this, or were known for this. I always point to that bridge in Trenton. Trenton makes, the world takes. This idea that was their history, that was their heritage. You go to communities throughout this country. Akron, Ohio was the rubber capital of the world. Toledo, the glass capital. Flint, automobiles. La Crosse, Wisconsin, cookware. I mean, you name it. There were there were places that this was their identity, and it was all stripped away. We went through the 1980s and into the 90s of deindustrialization and horrible trade policy and neoliberalism that brought us this idea that we can have trickle down. We give the rich people all the money, and they'll take care of us. They'll make sure that there are jobs, and their pockets will fill, and then there will be things that spill over. I think we're in this moment right now where this administration, the Biden administration, is looking to the past and going, what created that prosperous working class? What did the greatest generation build, not just for themselves, but for their children, that created broad prosperity for working people and the owners and the wealth class, because we had them too? What did we have? Well, we had really super high tax rates. And when you start talking to people about what the tax rates of the 1950s and 60s were, oh my goodness, nobody actually believes me, is what the interesting part is. Nobody believes that, in 1953, the top marginal tax rate in the country was 92%. Nobody believes that. Oh, that's not possible. And you go, yeah, in today's dollars, anyone who made more than $1.6 million back then in today's dollars, that dollar over 1.6 million was taxed at 92%. And all down the scale. Now, they didn't pay 92% on all of their money. It was the first 2,000 was taxed at a small amount, the next 2,000 another small amount, until you built up to 1.6 million. So you had a tax bracket every $2,000, and incrementally it went up. So the bigger your shoulders, this is where this analogy comes from. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you can carry back to the cave. The better off you're doing, the more you can help society invest in infrastructure and military and education and healthcare and all the things that societally we think back to that era and go, that was the great time. Now, understand, nobody paid 92%. The effective rate was somewhere in the high 60s, low 70s, as I remember. But it's still a damn sight bigger than the zero that Jeff Bezos paid at a number of years. The corporate tax rates back then were in the 50% range, not 15. And you wonder why we have these massive deficits and this debt. We've given the wealth class everything they could want in the hopes that eventually they would share, and we know that they never do. So it's my view that along with the high tax rates, and we did have high tax rates that built a giant infrastructure plan that put the highway system across this country that Eisenhower built. We paid for our wars, like I said, hospitals and schools and all of this. Higher education, we didn't saddle a generation of kids with massive debt like we're doing today, just so we could have more rich people. We didn't do that. We also had smart government policy, like building an infrastructure, a highway system to move product and to move people and to move us into the 20th century back then. And we also had strong labor unions, where people shared in the prosperity of the wealth that they created. That recipe is, for me, the path forward, and it's what the Biden administration has been moving us towards. You look at the infrastructure bill that they pushed through, has strong prevailing wage provisions in it. You look at the manufacturing that they're trying to bring back, talking about, hey, let's make sure that those are union jobs so that people can earn a living off it. The CHIPS bill, that's going to help create manufacturing. And again, this idea of pushing for stronger worker rights and representation so that the wealth is shared. We haven't had that in a while. And I think that's why we have such anger and such division, is because there's a hopelessness, a helplessness, if you will, of most people go, well, I can't deal with this. So these cultural, social, whatever issues that are thrown out to us as red meat, that's what they grasp onto. Personally, I believe the way forward, the way to unite us as a country, is to organize the workplaces. And we're seeing this all across the country as organizing is almost reaching pandemic levels for corporate America. It's contagious. There are people organizing all over the place. In fact, nearly, I think, 274 employees at Home Depot in Philadelphia just announced yesterday that they have filed a unionization effort in that Home Depot. The very first Home Depot in the country, by the way, which I hope this will catch like wildfire. We're seeing workers in fast food. We're seeing workers in coffee shops and in retail stores and, well, Home Depot. We're seeing workers organizing like that great generation did back so long ago. And for me, this is the exciting part of this. This is what I think can help us move in a much more unified, much more prosperous direction, which is why we're heading out on the tour on September 30th and going to spend the entire month going to communities across this country and investigating. Hey, what was great? What then happened? How did you lose this identity, this prosperity? And then, what are we doing to change this? And understand that we're at a crossroads. We could go backward and end up with, whoever in 2 years down the road ends up becoming the next president could take us on a completely different path. I think the Biden administration is moving us in the right direction, recreating manufacturing, investing in the country, making sure that workers have the right to collectively bargain. All stuff that I think will move us in a more prosperous direction. But I'm curious your thoughts. Love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Want to know what you think? Quick break. Back on the other side. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Remember, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find ours. Back after this.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, going along the lines of this manufacturing, you look at the fact that the White House put out the number that so far in 2022, there have been companies that have announced $13 billion in domestic electric vehicle manufacturing that's going to be happening in this country. That's more than triple the 2020 investment. That means we're moving in that direction, that we're going to make stuff again. That's exciting. And it's important because I think if we learned anything out of the pandemic, you got to make stuff. As I've always said, you need domestic production for domestic consumption, and we should be doing much more of it. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Kurt on line 1 from Tucson. Kurt, what's on your mind, brother?
Hey, Rick, how you doing, brother?
I am living the dream. What's going on?
Awesome. So I got some good news for you on National Registration Day.
Hit me.
So the youth from Starfish Environmental Group have been registering voters in Western Pennsylvania they started it about the beginning of June. And so today, from June till today, they have registered 738 new voters for the general election here in November.
No, it's fantastic. The more young voters that we get registered, the better. The hope is that come November 8th, they wander into the voting booth and they pull the lever.
Yeah, and I think the messaging that the youth had towards the new voters, they're really good at messaging, Rick, and I really think they're going to respond. I think the voters that they registered, and they kind of just the sad thing is like I wish the DNC and the DCCC would spend more time on voting education, and because I think it's confusing for a lot of new people. Even when I look back at when I was 18 and I did it, I was kind of lost, and there was no one really to kind of guide you. I remember looking at the ballot and it's like, what do I do?
See, this is where, Kurt, where I encourage parents to teach their children. Our kids have gone with us every election cycle since they were born, except for during the COVID period where we did the mail-ins, and even then showed them the ballot. So for me, democracy is participatory. We need to pass it down generation to generation. I don't think it's something we're born with. I think it's something that we have to pass on. So, to your point, and this is where I'm hoping that there are parents listening, take your kids to the polls with you. We take ours first thing in the morning. They're a little late for school, but that's okay. They learn how to participate in their democracy, and I think that's what we need to be passing on as parents as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it's I don't think it's really taught how important it really is. And one of the good things that the whole group of Starfish has been doing throughout the primary is trying to convey, getting it across that the local and the state elections really matter. And because I think a lot of times we focus too much on the presidential. Matter of fact, they were just talking about on 60 Minutes Sunday, they were asking Biden if he's going to run for 2024. And I think there's so many things you could be questioning him with instead of that, because we're not even there yet.
No, you're so spot on, and I tell people all the time, it's those off year, not even your congressional elections. It's your local dog catcher, your local county commissioner, your local tax assessor. Those are the people that you should be voting for, in higher numbers, because those are the people who affect your daily life much more than president or senator does. This is why, again, democracy is participatory. You got to get in there, roll your sleeves up, and learn a little. And I know in our busy lifestyles, and everybody's working, 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. It's hard to do, but it's part of what we have to do. Right.
Out of all the 45 states that we phone banked in to make calls for candidates across the country, the state of Florida was really kind of weird. We never really. Until this election, we've never really phone banked much in Florida. And the biggest response we got, and this is from Democrats and Independents, it was overwhelming how many voters down there said, we don't vote in the primary election. And we were like, no, you guys, you really got to vote. A lot of people yell and scream about term limits. And the primary election, to me, is the best sort of system to term limit.
That is our term limit. Your right to vote. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of throwing the bums out, Kurt. Big fan.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that makes me happier than to go in and say, Scott Perry, pardon me, Scott Perry, my representative. There's nothing makes me happier than going to vote against him, and I wish more people in my district would, so we could throw the bum out. But that's just my thoughts.
Exactly.
But hey, good news, Kurt. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you're keeping up. Please keep us up to date on what's going on even down the road.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it. No, this is, again, back to this idea that voting matters. Every election. For me, it's that simple. Now, tomorrow, evidently, supposedly big breaking news coming out of New York, as the Attorney General there, Letitia James, is tweaking out major announcement in the morning. Got a lot of people speculating what that major announcement could be. Oh, I don't know. Maybe something about the Trump Organization. Maybe something about Trump and his business dealings. Maybe, I don't know. Going to be interesting to find out. Now, it's been a bad week so far for Trump because there's a big announcement coming. We also found out that that the sexual battery suit brought by Jean Carroll, that is going to move forward. She's planning to sue him for sexual battery under the state's new survivors law. So things not going well. And if you look at the other news today in the Trumposphere, the special Grand Master, Grand Poobah that he asked for, not having what the defense is putting out. In fact, this special master, Raymond Dearie, Judge Raymond Dearie, said, my view is you can't have your cake and eat it too, meaning you can't claim that it belongs to you and classified stuff, and all of the if you remember the evolving story about what Trump actually had. They're basically saying, look, pick a story, stick with it. You don't get all this stuff back. Trump's insisting that he shouldn't have to state in any legal proceeding whatsoever that he declassified these documents. And you go, but wait a second, I thought he waved the hand. I thought the magic hand waving thing, I thought that happened. Well, evidently, this is where they're not putting up really any type of defense or any type of anything. There's nothing here. And that's the weird part about it. You go, why would you put yourself in the middle of this without any type of defense? So another bad day in the Trumposphere. And it kind of makes you go, good. Maybe somebody will finally hold Trump accountable. Maybe finally something will jump up and grab him. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What do you think? What will the special announcement be? Are we expecting Trump himself? Is this someone with the Trump Organization? Maybe one of the brain trust? I'm interested to find out. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with our good friend Will Bunch about his upcoming book. Also, I got a lot of email on the whole Nazi thing, on the whole hand raising, the whole what looked like a Nazi salute. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day the Chicago Teachers Union walked off the job for the first time in 25 years. The historic week-long strike resonated nationwide among trade unionists and served to reinvigorate the labor movement. Certainly, higher wages and better benefits were among the teachers' demands. The city's mayor, Rahm Emanuel, had canceled the union's wage increase, laid off close to 1,000 teachers, and went on the attack against seniority rights and working conditions. The strike enjoyed wide wide public support among parents and the public. Teachers emphasized broader educational problems they faced, namely the attacks fueled by corporate privatization. They wanted a return to more traditional forms of education rather than simply preparing students for endless rounds of testing. They wanted more art, music, and gym classes. And they demanded stable funding for social support services for the most vulnerable at-risk students. Union teachers understood that the Board of Education was using standardized testing to get rid of teachers and schools in order to privatize education, all in the name of turning around failing schools and helping the kids. Though the contract was less than perfect, it showed the power working people have to hold the line against continued assaults on their standards of living, especially in the public sector. The CTU was able to beat back attempts at merit pay and increased use of student test scores in teacher evaluations. They won first-time recall rights, supply reimbursements, and liberal arts classes. There were concessions, however, made on seniority rights, pay for laid-off teachers, and longer workdays. But the CTU demonstrated that strikes can win in a period of extended anti-union onslaughts.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars, Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars, Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at natvup.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who...
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of email on yesterday's comments about the Mastriano rally here in Pennsylvania. Was it a Nazi salute, or was it just good God-fearing, God-American-loving Christians pointing to the heavens, seeking guidance from the good Lord above? Which? Look at the video. You decide for yourselves. A bunch of folks not happy with my comment about the Nazi fidget spinners. I'm waiting for it to come, man. I'm waiting for the Nazi windmills, little things. They're just windmills. They're not Nazi symbols. We seem to be making a lot of excuses for what is right in front of us. Scary times. Here to share some thoughts on, well, was it the Hitler thing, or was it just, hey, we're just pointing up. What's wrong with a group of people all at the same time doing this kind of thing? That's why I've asked my good friend Will Bunch to come share some thoughts. He's a national columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Also got a new book out. I'm going to want to get to this. After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me on.
So
I guess you did not see this coming, huh? Is that that's the obvious one. But, yeah.
boom. So was it the dreaded the Sig Heil salute, or was it just good God-fearing Christian folk all coming together for a revival to share their dream and point to the heavens and one marching together? What are we going with?
Look, I mean, they love to quibble about these things, and was it a Nazi thing? I guess not. It wasn't an official Nazi salute, but like the Stephen Colbert thing about truthiness. I mean, was it Hitler-ness? Absolutely, it was. It's look, it's the same. Whether it's what the Nazi Party members were doing in Nuremberg in 1934, or not. The principles are basically the same. You've got a cult of personalities, people willing to surrender their identities for this group identity and to symbolize it with this raised fist and this kind of loyalty pledge. It's the principles of fascism. We're seeing all of these principles of fascism play out, whether it's, these diatribes against their enemies, the demonizing of the other, Ron DeSantis, who's another one I would put in the pool, shipping these migrants to Martha's Vineyard and dehumanizing people trying to seek asylum in the United States. Here in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz is really demonizing anybody who's ever committed a crime, basically, or been accused of committing a crime. Some of them didn't even do it, but he's running against criminals. So I mean, these are fascist tendencies, and now, Christian nationalism, which is the employment of the idea that Christian law should trump democracy, basically. All of these things are tenets of fascist political movements. So when you see people raising their right arm, and if you just look at the videos, look at the pictures, it just looks pretty much the same. I guess they added a wrinkle at the Trump rally in Youngstown of raising their one finger because they're also into QAnon, that's not really better. That's kind of worse, right? Yeah. That they are fascist and supporting QAnon. But I know, Rick, you've probably seen the movie Dr. Strangelove, right? And remember how Peter Sellers' character, well, one of his characters, who's the ex-Nazi, well, Dr. Strangelove, the ex-Nazi brilliant rocket scientist, can't restrain himself from raising his right arm in that fashion. And I thought of that scene watching the pictures of the Mastriano rally, because when this preacher, or alleged preacher, this Lance Wallnau character, asked the people at the Mastriano rally to raise their arms like that, it's funny how many of them did it exactly like the Hitler salute, like they were primed for that.
It was like visceral. They already had it in them to do, and it's kind of frightening. But I look at a lot of the people who are trying to be Trump and trying to pick up on the Trump, because that seems to be the Republican Party in this moment. But nobody, I think, moves further in the fascist direction, in my view, than Mastriano does. I mean, this guy is, he's a true believer. I think Oz is trying to do whatever he can do, to get ahead, to use this moment politically to try and to score points, to score votes. But I believe to his core, Mastriano is, the reincarnation of that carbon cutout, which is that much more frightening to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you go back and look at his life story, I mean, he's animated by certain values that go way back. He wrote this creepy master's thesis back in 2001, about a leftist, gay-inspired takeover of the United States, and this heroic colonel who hides in the woods to fight them off. I mean, he's got a martyr complex. He's obsessed, with lost causes and martyrs and Flight 93 and the Confederacy and I mean, you don't want somebody with a martyr complex as governor of your state.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring that up because I was watching a couple of clips of General Michael Flynn, and we're going to attack the machine gun nests. I'm not getting on the Nazi train, and this idea, the hero complex comes into this as well. Yeah. That that they alone were going to stop this entire machine. That
I alone can fix it, like Trump famously said. And I mean, it's just a classic tenet of call it whatever, authoritarianism or strongmen or fascism or but I mean that's the general direction. I mean Mastriano seems to suffer from extreme homophobia. He's constantly talking about, I mean, his number one issue seems to be taking away transgender rights if he gets elected governor. He's got an obsession with Dr. Rachel Levine. Talks about her all the time at events in a mocking fashion. Apparently his mother was lost her seat in their New Jersey Township School Board back in 2000 because she wrote something that was a diatribe against quote homosexuals unquote. So it runs in the family, and so
sounds like a childhood thing.
Yeah, he's a true believer, with a homophobe with a martyr complex, who's gotten in deep with this Christian nationalist movement. And I mean, the judgment, to think that he wants to make a person like this pastor, this Lance Wallnau, who led the Nazi style pledge, that he wants to make this guy the face of his campaign. I would urge people to go to inquirer.com and check out a story, not by me, but by one of my great colleagues, William Bender, same initials, investigative reporter who did a deep dive into this Lance Wallnau character that was published today. And the guy's a con man, selling the gold coins of Donald Trump and religious figures, and really doesn't have much of a theological background. He just is kind of a con man and a huckster who kind of saw the ultimate con, and he's wormed his way into Doug Mastriano's inner circle, as so many of these people have. Julie Green, the self-styled prophet who is convinced that Nancy Pelosi is drinking baby's blood and has said all kinds of other insane things. I think she said something about King Charles having murdered Queen Elizabeth.
There's a ton of insanity. And you got to ask yourself, and because I have this conversation with people who I used to have some respect for, who vote for Republicans, and you go, this is the Republican Party today. This isn't the party of Reagan. This isn't the party of Eisenhower. It's not the party of Lincoln. This isn't your parents' or grandparents' Republican Party. These people are off the beaten path, and I don't know how they got so far off the sane path, but they're not on it.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, the fact that they can make people like us nostalgic for Ronald Reagan. I mean, what does that tell you?
No, look, Reagan, Nixon.
If I was, if Doug Mastriano was going to become my governor, I would trade him for Ronald Reagan in a New York Minute. But and I'm somebody who wrote a book critical of Reagan. But so.
No, and the thing is people were going, Trump is, Trump's the worst thing ever. I go, no, I was saying this during Trump's 4 years. I go, what scares me is what's after Trump. Trump isn't very bright. It's all about him. He's a hyper narcissist, and he can be played, which we've seen, on the international scale. These folks, these ideologues, these extremists, these religious nutcases, they can't be swayed by anything other than pure ideology, and that's the frightening part.
Right. Well, I mean, you're seeing these kind of mutations, right? Because it's like Mastriano is like the religious Trump, right? The authoritarian, but really plugged into this religious movement. And I think I think the guy, and I think you'd probably agree with me. I think the guy that, because I felt the same way during Trump, that like the next guy could be worse for those same reasons, that, you saw Trump's, narcissism and occasional buffoonery just drag him down into the muck.
Yep.
And, what if there was a guy who really knew how to use the tools of, authoritarianism?
Yeah, and this is what I was saying during the Trump years, that, DeSantis worried me because he has all those tendencies and is a smart guy. He's somebody who knows how to use.
DeSantis is the guy. Although, you have to wonder, like, if he just got so full of himself. I mean, it seems like everything he's done recently has been to outdo the thing before, and he's, it's kind of an Icarus flying too close to the sun type situation, maybe. But I mean, I think I have to think this Martha's Vineyard thing, on some levels, is going to backfire. Not that any true believer Republicans are going to defect. They're going to love it. They're going to buy the Fox Kool-Aid. But I thought it was really dumb to go after Venezuelans. I mean, in a state like Florida, where, I mean, what did he win last time around, by like 40 or 50,000 votes? Or, I mean, he won by a very small margin in 2018. He was probably on track to do better this time. But what if all those Latino voters in Florida who fled communism, whether it was Venezuela or Cuba or or socialism or communism, or some of the other leftist countries who've been voting Republican for that reason, how is deporting Venezuelan asylum seekers people fleeing the Maduro regime, how is that going to look to them? And he's going to lose some votes over this, and I don't know if he's going to lose enough to lose the election. Probably not. But,
I think the calculus is that.
But it does question his broader judgment if he's going to run for president.
Yeah, but no, I think this was calculated, and I know it upset Donald Trump, because that was his stunt. He wanted to do that, and was very angry about it. But I don't think it's going to hurt DeSantis. I know my lefty friends are like, "Oh, this is horrible. It's we're gonna." No, the cruelty is the point. It's who these people are. Sure. So the more cruel, the better, and the more you're going to rile up the base and get them fired up to get out and vote. I don't see this as going to hurt him. I think this is going to really, inflame the base and get them out to support him. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, right. And his short-term goal has got to be peeling would-be primary voters away from Trump. So if that's his goal, it's a pretty good stunt for him politically, right? Yeah. So, but he does have to get through a gubernatorial election. But
he does.
He will probably.
Oh, absolutely. I don't see Charlie Crist beating him. I hope so. I would love to see him gone, but. Even if he was, that means he's got all of his time to run for president. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Bunch. Will's a national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Got a new book out, and I got to talk a little bit about this. After the Ivory Tower Falls, how college broke the American dream and blew up our politics, and how to fix it. Will, I understand you're going to be in Chicago on Saturday, October 22nd. For our listeners in Chicago on AM 820 WCPT, you're going to be at the Northwestern University campus of Evanston. At the Norris University Campus Center. Talk about the book. This is a big deal for you, right?
It is a big deal. I've been working on writing the book for a couple of years. It's an idea I probably had for more than a decade. Just trying to figure out, your colleagues, as it were, who do right-wing radio. I listen to their shtick sometimes because I want to know what the other side was saying, especially when Rush Limbaugh was still alive. I spent when I was a more active dad, I spent too much time in the car. And so I would tune into Rush Limbaugh to see what they were saying. And it's going back to like the 2000s. And I was just kind of fascinated by the whole topic of resentment against elite, educated, the professional class, journalists like myself, but college professors, Hollywood movie stars, people like that. And, it seemed to me that we were starting to really, split up, cleave along this line of whether or not you went to college. And lo and behold, we started to see that in the election results, right? more and more than any time before, the Democratic Party is now heavily the choice of people with college degrees, and more the Republicans have tailored their pitch, to working class voters, and trying to play on grievance and resentment against the professional classes or the elites, as they call it. I personally don't feel particularly elite, but
No, I agree with you, but
that's how we're characterized on the left. Yeah.
Here's my problem, though, and it would fit neatly like this. And I know a lot of my white working class friends do vote for Republicans and have bought the anger and the jealousy and the division. My problem, Will, is that the Republicans haven't brought any policy that would help them. In fact, the policies that Republicans continue to push out actually hurts them, which is kind of that useful idiot moment.
Of course, and I see that specifically in the subject of my book, which is, so what has happened. In the book, I try to look at the history and the current situation of what's happened to college and expensive. Why, what's happened to college in America? Why did it become so expensive, and why did it become harder to get into, less accessible, and particularly, why do so many middle class people feel that college is out of reach for them? So these are, these are some of the topics, that I explore in the book. And could you rephrase your question a little bit, because I kind of, in saying that, I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, I mean, the reality is, and the point that I'm making is, I get the idea that Republicans are going after working class voters.
So what I was going to say is, it's funny because when it comes to college itself, I mean, if I were Republican, if I were representing a Rust Belt community, and people in my district were getting shut out of the labor market because they weren't educated enough for employers, or they didn't have the right skills that employers were looking for, I'd be working on that issue, right? I'd be saying, all right, well, maybe, first of all, I'd like to see more of my constituents go to college, but the ones who don't want to college, how can the government do more with trade schools, vocational training, internships, apprenticeships? How can the government work on the fact that 18-year-olds are falling off the grid because we're saying that you're on your own at age 18 and not helping them? And that's not what Republicans do. Instead they start culture wars. They're telling kids, just don't go to college because leftist professors are going to indoctrinate you. And how is that helping these kids? So what are they, all right, so you don't go to college because you're not going to be indoctrinated. Why aren't they pushing for the things that people who don't go to a 4-year school need, like free trade school? In the book, I profile, it's kind of a fluke, but in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which is where I live, there is a free trade school. It's called the Williamson School of Trades. It was an eccentric millionaire back in the 19th century, when millionaires were like billionaires, basically. Didn't have any heirs and left all his money to found this school that was originally for orphans. Now it's for men, but it's a 3-year trade school, and if you get in, it's free, and you learn carpentry or masonry or landscaping, and employers are tripping over themselves to hire these kids once they come out. And there's no reason we can't do more of that and try and match people with skills. But
yeah, and there's no reason we can't go back.
When's the last time a Republican proposed that?
Yeah, and also we could go back to the time when employers used to bring people on and entry-level jobs and give them the skills they need to help them in their business, not putting it on the back of the taxpayers or on the back of the individual. There's a lot to go around here, but I hope the folks will come out and take a look at your spiel, grab the book, which is After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics and How to Fix It, written by Will Bunch. Will, as always, incredible talking with you. I appreciate the time. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Hey, Rick, it was great to be on. Thanks for having me. Have me on anytime. I love it.
Good stuff. Again, make sure you check out the book. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Gonna take a quick break right here. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1830. That was the day that the Reverend Richard Allen brought black leaders together at his Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met to discuss the rising white violence and discrimination toward black free residents in northern cities. 40 people answered Allen's call, representing 7 states. The delegates included many of the leading black ministers and abolitionists of the day. Those who attended risked personal harm as white mobs threatened the delegates. Due to the danger, the group met in secret starting on September 15th. Then, on this day, they began open sessions. For 5 days, the delegates considered multiple responses to the conditions black Northerners faced. They founded the American Society for Free Persons of Color for improving their conditions in the United States, for purchasing lands, and for establishment of a settlement in the province of Canada. The organization emphasized pushing for legal protections for black residents in the United States. They focused on education as a means of uplifting and improving the lives of black citizens. But delegates also supported the idea of an outlet to Canada for those black families who wanted to leave for their safety. The National Convention reconvened several times over the next 3 decades. Multiple meetings were held at the state and local levels. These meetings gave black leaders a chance to devise coordinated strategies to stand up against the increasing violence and restrictive laws of the North, and to call for an end of slavery in the South. One outcome of these meetings was the founding of labor schools to train black students in the skilled trades as a means to gain economic independence. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So again, if you want to see Will, we'll be at the Chicago Humanities Festival on Saturday, October 22nd, talking about the book After the Ivory Tower Falls at the Norris University Center on the campus of Northwestern University in Evanston. We will be in Chicago for our Chicago audience on October the 11th for the Greg Palast movie. We're finalizing date. It looks like we're going to be teaming up with the Rainbow Push folks and Jesse Jackson to show that in conjunction with WCPT AM 820. Also, for our listeners in Minneapolis, listening on KTNF, we will be in Minneapolis on the 12th of October for an event there at the Crooners Lounge. I hear it's a fabulous place. A couple hundred people can come see the flick, and Greg will be there as well, I believe. I get a chance to meet Greg Palast and take a look at the film, which really, the previews that I've seen, one of those things that just makes you shake your head and go, on National Voter Registration Day, we should be seeing that movie today to make sure that we all get out and register to vote, because the things that the right will go to, the lengths that they will go to make sure that people don't have access to the ballot box, pretty remarkable. And in fact, in one of the scenes, Greg goes to this woman's house, who is big Republican poobah there in Georgia, and the Georgia law gives individuals the right to challenge other people's votes. Well, she challenged something like 30,000 people's votes. Interestingly enough, they seem to be a particular type race of people, not Lily White like her. But Greg goes through the list. Do you know this person? No. Why'd you block their vote? Good question. Maybe something that could be addressed. This is why, again, on National Voter Registration Day, you got to make sure you're registered. You got to make sure you are registered. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast.
We're reaping what we've sown. We're now experiencing devastating climate impacts.
3 simultaneous major storms underscore climate crisis impacts. Climate change juiced Pakistan's catastrophic flooding, study finds. Plus,
this is my ancestors' land, and I feel like I shouldn't have to leave.
Court blocks massive proposed plastics plant in Louisiana.
All of those blockages and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen to you as a climate scientist is that your predictions come true.
Yeah, that's also the worst thing that can happen to you as a political news person on the radio. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know the Queen of England died a couple of weeks ago, so that's kept the news media busy. But as it turns out, there were 3 huge storms over one single weekend.
And a lot more than that over this past summer. As we go to air, it's Climate Week in New York City, the annual Climate Solutions Conference coinciding with the United Nations General Assembly. Both events arrive after a summer of extreme weather disasters around the world. Pakistan is still reeling from one of the worst climate disasters in history. The World Health Organization warns of a second disaster. Waterborne and mosquito-borne diseases are surging after unprecedented rains inundated a third of the nation, killing more than 1,500 people, and there is not enough medicine to treat millions of displaced people living in crowded camps. This week, climate experts at the World Weather Attribution Initiative reported that climate change supercharged the intensity of Pakistan's record rainfall by as much as 50%. And the month-long extreme heat wave that preceded the rain was made 30 times more likely. This past weekend, 3 powerful storms hit simultaneously around the world, underscoring the rising costs of inaction on climate change. Hurricane Fiona ripped across Puerto Rico as a Category 1 storm, causing a territory-wide blackout on its fragile electric grid. Some areas received as much as 30 inches of rain, triggering astonishing flooding. As we go to air, 1 death has been confirmed, thousands rescued from the floods. President Biden has issued a state of emergency to free up federal disaster funds.
I hope he's ready to throw them some paper towels.
And FEMA says it learned from monster Hurricane Maria, which devastated the island 5 years ago this week. This time, FEMA pre-staged emergency personnel and supplies. Also on Sunday, Typhoon Nanmadol slammed Japan, unleashing torrential flooding in mountain areas. More than 9 million people were told to evacuate. The storm is expected to cause billions in damages. In Alaska, the zombie remnants of Typhoon Merbok hit western Alaska as the most intense storm in 50 years, causing dangerous storm surge flooding over more than 1,000 miles of Alaska's low-lying coastline, destroying bridges, roads, and coastal defenses.
All within 2 or 3 days.
Yes. And on Democracy Now!, climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann summed up the onslaught of extreme weather this summer, from historic heat waves in China, Europe, and the U.S. to Pakistan's biblical floods and this weekend's crushing storms.
We are witnessing the devastating consequences of climate change now. This isn't 10 years into the future. It's not way off in the Arctic. It's where we live now. We are experiencing devastating consequences of past climate inaction, and it really drives home the importance of taking action now.
Yeah, and wait until it gets really bad.
But some good news.
Good.
In Australia, the parliament has passed its first major climate legislation in more than 10 years, with a first-ever mandate to cut Australia's carbon emissions 43% by 2030, which would bring one of the world's top coal exporters in line with Western allies like the U.S. and the U.K.
Nice.
Also, South Australia, where they famously installed one of the world's first utility-scale battery farms on a bet from Tesla CEO Elon Musk.
Right.
South Australia is now set to become the first major regional grid to run on 100% renewables.
Very cool. I remember when they used to get blackouts all the time until Elon Musk and his batteries came along.
Yep. And finally,
this is my home. This is my ancestors' land. And I feel like I shouldn't have to leave my home to let an industry come in here and destroy what was built up for us from generations.
A state district court in Louisiana has revoked air permits for a massive proposed $9 billion petrochemical plastics complex in the majority black district of St. James Parish, a region known as Cancer Alley because of high cancer rates among residents living near a large number of polluting industries. Formosa Plastics Corporation says it will appeal, but the ruling is is a major victory for local environmental justice groups.
Nice. Good news indeed. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we didn't have time for, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it is indeed National Voter Registration Day. Again, hope everyone has checked their registration. If you're not registered, get registered. If you've got friends, family, neighbors, strangers, the guy down the block, make sure you're knocking on doors going, you registered to vote? And then help them. Pretty simple. As what happened earlier, look, we had a caller say, look, I didn't know how to vote the first time. Parents, this is an excellent opportunity to do that. Like I said, our kids have gone to every election, every year. We drag them along with us, except for during the pandemic. But we did show them the ballot as we put in the mail-in one. So this is one of those things you pass down. Democracy is participatory. But here to share some thoughts on this National Voter Registration Day, I've asked my good friend J.J. Abbott to come talk with us. J.J. is the Executive Director of Commonwealth Communications. I love their website, vote.pa. Vote.pa. Remember that? Vote.pa. J.J., thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, great to be here, and happy National Voter Registration Day.
So what's the... what other than the command that I laid out, is there something more to that? Somewhere we can go to make sure that we're registered? I know in Pennsylvania there's a website, but what do we do?
Well, yeah, it's a really important time to do two things. The first is check your registration, and then from there, if you are registered, make sure you know the different ways that you can vote. And so, in Pennsylvania, it's a really great time for everybody to sign up to vote by mail if that's something you want to do. Otherwise, if you check your registration, it'll also help you figure out where you can go vote on Election Day. And if you're not registered, it's really important that you do it now. One, you want to make sure you get everything through the process, but there is a deadline here in Pennsylvania. It's October 24th, but it's a really great time just to get ready to vote. And then once you're ready to vote, then you got to find a way to help make sure we get the right people elected, because we got to all get registered, make sure our registrations are up to date, and then we got to get in this fight, because these elections are really, really important, and the stakes are really high for a lot of different places, especially here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I hear there's a crazy guy running for governor. A lot of saluting and weird hand motions and a lot of pledges and stuff like that.
Doug Mastriano is running for governor here against Josh Shapiro. He is running one of the weirdest campaigns, but I think what's most important in that election is the stakes here in Pennsylvania for the kinds of policies that could get enacted one way or another. Doug Mastriano is incredibly extreme. He is also very dangerous. His agenda is really outside even the mainstream of this crazy MAGA Republican Party, but he has a lot of allies in the Pennsylvania state legislature that could also have a lot of power, and put those two together and you have one toxic combination of crony capitalism and an extreme agenda that will affect our rights and freedoms and put Pennsylvania in a very dark path for our future. And so, it's really important that people are getting engaged now. This is going to be a turnout election. So if you care about the stakes of this election, you got to make sure you're registered, that your registration is up to date, that you have a plan to vote. But then it's all about us getting more and more people out to vote. There's some incredible organizations here in Pennsylvania and across the country that you can get involved with right now. I'm wearing New Pennsylvania Project, which is one of them. But there's a lot of options out there. So really, it's a really important time for us to not only get ready to vote ourselves, but start getting our friends, our families, and our neighbors engaged in the election, because the stakes are really high.
Yeah. Now, you said crony capitalism, and in my mind immediately goes the marriage of crony capitalism and authoritarian government. There's a word for that. The F word.
There's a lot of words for that, but I think there's a lot of danger to it as well. And, we can call it all sorts of different things, but I think one of the things that we've seen in other states is that when states go really far in the wrong direction with that toxic combination, it has really, really dire impacts for the people that live in those states. You look at a state like Alabama, which shows very little respect for workers and also engages in a really, really extreme social agenda. And the outcomes there are horrible. And someone like Doug Mastriano looks at Alabama and thinks that's the kind of policy that I want to put in place, taking us backwards in terms of how we fund and support our public schools, taking us backwards on how we treat women and other parents that are experiencing starting a family. These are the kinds of things that we've seen have a really disastrous impacts in states, but they're very real now for states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona and Georgia, where if the wrong people continue to get elected or get elected here and seize power for the first time, like these MAGA Republicans like Mastriano and Lake and Tudor Dixon and all these other yahoos out there that, their agendas seem so far out of the mainstream, but there are a lot of people that do support them. And so we need to make sure that we're bringing out the people who are unlikely to vote in this election. So that's why it's just really important that we're expanding the electorate and getting more people engaged in the process, and that we're talking to lower propensity voters and the kinds of people who may be thinking about sitting this election out, but if they know about the stakes of it for them personally, that we can get them out to vote. And so that's why it's really important that we're organizing, we're mobilizing, and we're getting ourselves and our neighbors and our families and our friends out to vote for the right candidates in this election.
Yeah, no, as a labor guy, and you brought up, the treatment of workers in places like Alabama, his agenda clearly is, and I've been saying this, all along, they will pass the no rights at work agenda on day one. It'll happen so fast, Kentucky's head will spin. So for all of my union brothers and sisters out there, this guy will come for you in a way that no Republican has been able to do in the history of this state. And I think that's saying something.
Absolutely. We've already seen here in Pennsylvania attacks on, public sector unions through the courts. We've seen, a lot of bills advance in the Pennsylvania Republican legislature, which has been controlled by these corporate-backed Republicans for decades. But what has stood in the way time and again is that veto pen. But Doug Mastriano was on stage at a conservative conference, and he didn't just say that he would get right to work passed. He said that he would be easy because he would use the full power of his grassroots organization, which we know has a lot of followers online and in different communities, to put pressure on other Republican legislators to enact that bill, which would roll back. Pennsylvania has such a rich history when it comes to workers' rights, a real struggle, some real horrible things that we've seen over time. But time and again, unions step up. They make not only life better for their workers, but for all workers and for all of our communities. And so Doug Mastriano has no respect for labor. He doesn't talk about what he will do for workers. But when he was asked by one of the biggest corporate-backed foundations, quote unquote, here, whether he would support a bill to take away the right to organize, he said he would be enthusiastic about making it happen. And so if you are in a union or if you care about workers having a say in their workplace, then there is only one choice in this race, and that's Josh Shapiro. And I just want to say, I think it's also important to note that it's not just that Mastriano's bad. It's also that Josh Shapiro is running probably one of the most pro-union campaigns for governor that we've ever seen here in Pennsylvania. And I think that's a reflection of two things. One, he is someone who has seen what corporations can do when they take advantage of their workers. There was a company, a big contractor up in State College, who stole over $20 million from their workers. Josh Shapiro filed a historic case to hold them accountable, and he won every dollar back for those workers. And the second thing is that we are seeing this incredible energy around people organizing who we've never expected to organize before. We've seen Starbucks workers all across Pennsylvania organizing. We just saw in Philadelphia workers at Home Depot, one of the most anti-union, pro-Republican corporations in the country, file to form a union. We've seen janitors and line workers and baristas and all of these people putting their name on the line in order to have a better say in their workforce. And so there is this energy around that. And I think it's really notable that we don't have a candidate for governor who is just saying, I'm going to stop these bad things they're trying to do about to unions. He's saying, I'm going to work and I'm going to fight for workers to have even more say, to have it make it even easier to organize, to have safer workplaces, better benefits, and higher wages. And that's really important for people to know, because the stark contrast that we have in the governor's race doesn't just apply to abortion or democracy or LGBTQ rights or all of the things that are just stark contrast. It also applies to the economy, because if you want an economy that puts workers first and not these big corporations, there's only one candidate that's going to do that, and that's Josh Shapiro.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with J.J. Abbott, Executive Director of Commonwealth Communications. Check out their website, vote.pa. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that, and maybe make sure you're registered today on National Voter Registration Day. And maybe tomorrow, if you didn't get to it today, make sure you're registered to vote, or the next day, because this is kind of important. And then, look outward to other friends and neighbors and coworkers, and maybe just even total perfect strangers. Now, you make an interesting point, and one that I think is important. It's more than just voting against how bad Mastriano is, and he is bad. It's more than voting against someone like Dr. Quack because he's bad, because he is. I think John Fetterman would make a great senator. It's more than voting against my representative Scott Perry. There are people out there that are running on an agenda that I think is moving us in a direction that harkens back to the days that people think of when our country was great, where we had strong manufacturing, where we had good infrastructure investment, where we had strong unions. We're moving back in that path, JJ, and I think this is what we vote for. It's one thing to vote against the craziness that we see on the right, but I think we're in this moment where we can vote for an agenda.
Absolutely. I think, and there's no greater example to that than what President Biden has been able to accomplish, even with a 50-50 Senate. The largest investment in clean energy jobs in history. The first time ever we're taking on big pharma to lower the cost of prescription drugs. A massive investment in our infrastructure, which is going to not only create jobs, but is going to make our communities better connected and more equitably taken care of. Yep. For the first time in forever, President Biden signing into law a measure that forces the richest people and big corporations in this country to pay their fair share. And I think that's really the contrast when you think about the economy, is that who's going to benefit from who's in charge. We saw what total control of Washington meant under the Republican Party. We saw them, our Senator, Pat Toomey, not only try to cut taxes for their big donors, but literally lobbying their colleagues to try to get bigger tax breaks for billionaires and corporations, make it easier for corporations to cheat on their taxes. And now we've seen a 180-degree shift where we're making sure that the rich and the powerful pay their fair share, and that we're taking better care of Americans and our communities. And so it's really important, I think, that we remember the contrast here, because it wasn't that long ago that Republicans had complete control in Washington. And frankly, it wasn't very great. You know, they didn't get a lot of stuff done. They certainly didn't do an infrastructure bill. They certainly didn't do anything to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Now, they failed at rolling back the Affordable Care Act, but they essentially gutted a huge part of it in their tax scam that gave huge benefits to these big corporations. And so, you know, it's really, really important that we're also trying to elect more people who think that way in Congress. And the Senate is a great example. Yeah. We elect 2 senators. We elect John Fetterman and Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. And it changes the game. You know, it's now the ability for us to pass things that protect our rights, to expand our freedoms, to maybe even pass something like the PRO Act, which would make it so much easier for people to organize and protect workers from getting retaliated against by bad bosses. And so, you know, there is this opportunity. So we need to be talking every single day about the threat to our freedoms and our futures that the MAGA Republicans represent. But we also have to remind people that there are things that are getting done, and there's more that we have to do. And if we vote and we organize and we hold our leaders accountable, we can actually make the kind of change that people are so frustrated never happens. And you look at the last, the last 6 months since, Biden really got got back in the game here with all of this stuff that's passed. And there's a lot of great things. Student debt relief that he signed into law is going to benefit almost 1 million people in Pennsylvania. And so these are the things that can happen if we actually elect people who give a damn about everybody else and not just the wealthy and powerful in this country.
Yep. So you got to make sure you're registered to vote. Vote.pa, the website. JJ Abbott, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. Great stuff. Keep up the great work, man.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all you do, Rick.
Our good friend JJ Abbott. Again, make sure you check out the website, vote.pa. Make sure you are registered. I'm going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's come out now that Liz Cheney has said that a number of Republican House members on January 6th referred to the former president as the Orange Jesus. And I'm going, the Orange Jesus? You know, is that like, because there have been a number of names for him kind of along those lines. The Orange Julius, the Nectarine Neuro, there's been a bunch of them. Tangerine Tiberius, all that. But to hear Republicans saying it, kind of makes you go, yeah, even they get it. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing well. I am the one who came up with the Orange Julius, by the way. I've been saying that since he was elected.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of those. Marmalade Mussolini I was using for a while. There's a bunch of them.
Exactly. And speaking of which, I found it rather hilarious that right off the bat, he and his lawyers got into it with with Deary.
Yeah, the special Grand Master.
Yeah,
the Grand Poobah.
Yes, exactly. I was like, well, that's a way to kick things off. It's amazing.
No, and look, this gives me some hope that, this stunt isn't going to work, that it's just going to prolong what is the inevitable. And I'm kind of looking to see what's going to happen tomorrow with the big announcement from Letitia James. I'm waiting to see what Fannie Harris does, or Fannie Willis does down in Georgia. I think that's the real case that could jump up and bite him, because we got the audio recording. Hey, if you could just find me 11,000 some votes, then we could win this thing. And just look at the cushions. And now we find out that after the election, some MAGA folks were actually in control of the voting machines. All of the fraud that they say was going on because they were doing it.
Oh, I know. I saw that an article on that in the Washington Post. It's just amazing. You just sat there, and I'm thinking at this point, well, Trump, let's see. My best advice to you is just, do one of two things. Decide that you need to go see Putin in Russia, which, boy, wouldn't that be grand, or plead insanity and hope for the best.
Yeah, I've had some people go, well, do you think you'll get a pardon? I'm going, no. There is in no scenario ever is Donald Trump pardoned, because he would have to admit his guilt.
Oh, I know. And you know what? I don't think the 75% of us that are sane, we would all rise up and take to the streets, I think, if he would be pardoned. I think that would be the very worst thing that Biden or any other president could do, would be to pardon him. I don't think that the majority of us that are sane would stand for it.
Yeah, I'm still saying he's never going to see the inside of a jail cell, but there are a lot of people who are saying I'm wrong. We'll see. I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful, but still my belief, not going to happen.
Well, maybe he'll just wave his little magic wand and make himself invisible.
There you
but
go.
Have a good evening.
Thanks so much, Alice. Yeah, he'll just wave the magic hand. Yeah, that's what he'll do. But look, I don't like the idea that you can't hold people accountable. Because look, if you had the kind of classified information that he had in his hand, you would never be heard from again. I mean, that reality winner had one document, one document. Almost 4 years of her life she spent behind bars for one document. And it wasn't the highly classified stuff either. I mean, this is the part where you go, equal justice. The Lady Liberty there is supposed to be blind, to where if you remember the old Beretta thing, you do the crime, you got to do the time. Well, it's time for them to do the time. And this comes back to us come election time, because there are a lot of these election deniers, a lot of people running for Secretary of State who say, well, if I don't like the election results, I can just change them. This is why right now this is so important, and why today, being National Register to Vote Day, why it's so important to understand why this election, more than any, is so important. Look, we've had fascistic type characters in the past. I don't know that we've had this many. I don't know we've had a party completely taken over. I mean, you go back to, before World War II, we had a fascist, tendency running through the GOP. It's always been there. It's always been in the shadows. Now it's taken over. The disease is, killing democracy. And that's what this election is about. Do we believe in democracy or do we not? Do we believe in what this country always stood for, or don't we? Are we going to move down this authoritarian path to where our grandchildren and great-grandchildren look back and go, what were they thinking? How could they let that happen? Keep asking myself the same thing. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, David Pepper is going to be here to share some thoughts on where we are. Back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2 on On this day in labor history, the year was 1830. That was the day that the Reverend Richard Allen brought black leaders together at his Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met to discuss the rising white violence and discrimination toward black free residents in northern cities. 40 people answered Allen's call, representing 7 states. The delegates included many of the leading black ministers and abolitionists of the day. Those who attended risked personal harm as white mobs threatened the delegates. Due to the danger, the group met in secret starting on September 15th. Then, on this day, they began open sessions. For 5 days, the delegates considered multiple responses to the conditions black Northerners faced. They founded the American Society for Free Persons of Color for improving their conditions in the United States, for purchasing lands, and for establishment of a settlement in the province of Canada. The organization emphasized pushing for legal protections for black residents in the United States. They focused on education as a means of uplifting and improving the lives of black citizens. But delegates also supported the idea of an outlet to Canada for those black families who wanted to leave for their safety. The National Convention reconvened several times over the next 3 decades. Multiple meetings were held at the state and local levels. These meetings gave black leaders a chance to devise coordinated strategies to stand up against the increasing violence and restrictive laws of the North, and to call for an end of slavery in the South. One outcome of these meetings was the founding of labor schools to train black students in the skilled trades as a means to gain economic independence. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at natvup.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you got Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, out there praising the Republican governors who are sending poor migrants into the blue enclaves, to use his words, the well-to-do blue enclaves. And again, I love the framing. Those elites, those rich people. So we're going to use the poor people. We're going to use the desperate in a very cruel way, and understand the cruelty is the point to make their point. Again, they've got no policy ideas. They've got no direction. They've got no way of solving this. It's just one-upsmanship. And Trump, very upset that his idea was stolen. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, just where we are, just how crazy things have gotten, and maybe
answer the question. Was it the Hitler salute? Was it the finger pointing to the sky? What was it going on here in Pennsylvania and in Ohio? I've asked our good friend David Pepper to come talk with us. David is the former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of the book Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So let's start with the DeSantis stunt that Trump seems very upset about, because that was his baby. He was working on that. I mean, he came up with the word caravan. He had this all in place.
Right. I mean, it really is a 2022 version of the caravan. And I think they knew they had a wave coming in 18. And so that the caravan was obviously coordinated with Fox News and the White House to change the subject. That's what this is. I mean, it's I think, illegal. My guess is it's inhumane. But this is a way to shift the conversation away from abortion, which they think is crushing them, and to get the national media and everyone else focused back on immigration. So it's the same trick as 4 years ago. My hope is that Democrats, we should call it out. I actually do think from the federal level to the local level, I hope they investigate it. I mean, even I think Sean Hannity said it. I love seeing this Trump-DeSantis battle. Hey, Sean Hannity said, I don't know if it was tonight or last night, if you put someone in your car and drove them across the state, wouldn't you be in trouble? So I think the answer is probably, yeah, you would be. I like the idea of holding these people accountable, but I also don't think we should let them change the subject, which is what they're trying to do. And I'll be very clear on this. It actually worked to some degree in 18. I mean, we literally had in Ohio, as we saw in Florida, Richard Cordray was ahead in the polls very late in that election. And I think the caravan thing actually worked in larger red states to get the vote out.
Yep.
So we shouldn't let them win this nonstop battle for distraction from other issues that are actually more pressing for most people.
No, and it's all about the fear. It's all about the scare. It's all about the fear.
It's about changing topics. They're afraid, and that's why Mitch McConnell loves it. He's getting he doesn't want Lindsey Graham talking about abortion. He wants DeSantis talking about this stuff. I mean, it's a classic change of subject.
Yeah, but for me, this election isn't even really about issues anymore. It's about the heart and soul of who we are as a people. Do we believe in democracy, or are we going to head down this fascistic kind of path? I mean, I look at my state, and I got a governor who, I think is a Nazi. I think he's the worst gubernatorial candidate in the entire country, who could do the most damage of anyone by destroying this state. I'm curious your thoughts how that plays.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think some voters respond to that, and we're seeing polls that show that more and more people are concerned about democracy. But I think one of the most important things, and I have this in my book, is this broader threat to democracy will work on some voters and get them to the polls. But for others, you still need to figure out, how do you connect it back to the things they care about? And so one of the big pushes in my book is to say, when you have these corrupt and extremist governments that we're stuck with, or that we would be stuck with if a nightmare like Mastriano came to power, connect it back to the issues that people are sitting around thinking about. The collapsing of schools, extremism so that a 10-year-old victim of rape in Ohio can't get an abortion access here and has to go to Indiana. You got to get it back to people, as opposed to a 30,000-foot debate about democracy. Figure out how to translate it to how that lack of democracy really undermines their life, their livelihood, their community, because it does. And there are very specific ways it's like Beto in Texas. The most salient issue before Uvalde was people froze to death because of the privatization of the energy grid. Figure out in your state how that extremism and now that lack of democracy impacts lives. That, for some people, they don't need to hear that. But for others, I think, sadly, we're in a battle where we have to show why it matters in their life that some of this may happen.
Yeah, no, we're in a battle, Art, and I think we're at a crossroads. And I've been saying, as part of the tour that we're planning, is we're at a decision point. We're at a crossroads. Do we continue down the path that Biden is moving us towards, reshoring manufacturing, investing in infrastructure, creating that environment that my grandparents' generation built of smart investment in the commons, high taxation on the very wealthy in corporate America that paid for education and healthcare and our wars and all of this stuff, and then strong unions so workers could share in the wealth that their labor created. We're moving in that direction. This election with someone like Mastriano, someone like J.D. Vance, someone like Dr. Quack, all that could be gone.
Yeah, and what's good about what the last few months of the Biden wins and the improving approval rating is he is showing concretely why it matters to have the right people in these jobs. I mean, he really, that Intel groundbreaking in Ohio was a huge deal. And it was partly because of the CHIPS Act passing, which people like Sherrod Brown and Tim Ryan have been pushing on for years. So what Biden is doing is, rather than us only saying they're terrible, he's showing that the alternative is progress. It's higher wages. It's smart solutions. It's modernizing our economy. So I do think he's put a nice contrast up about, we're not just complaining about what could happen, which there's a lot to say, but he's also showing some of the path forward on things like student debt as well. And I think that contrast is helping. And it's going to help candidates, even though his approval ratings aren't in the 50s, it at least is a contrast versus this, incredibly dark, dreary, cynical vision that you hear from J.D. Vance and others that are, it's so, it's just hard to imagine. They're giving nothing but just the worst negative, just this bowing down at Trump. There's no message there.
Yeah,
no, I think Biden is shaping a nice, more positive direction that people can at least understand.
Well,
in action, not just words.
I've been saying that Biden is doing all the things that Trump talked about. So while Biden doesn't say a lot, he's all action. Trump was all words. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, author of the book Laboratories of Autocracy. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media how you can look at it. Now, Trump was in your state, had the little rally there in Youngstown. Where the finger in the sky thing or the salute, or I don't even know what it was. I've heard so many distortions. We had the same thing here, not too far from where I'm sitting, with Mastriano and his crowd. Why is this important? Why these symbols? Why do you think this is important, and why do you think it's taken so much oxygen of us talking about?
I think we are very slow to see like that proverbial frog in a pot of boiling water. We're very slow to see a true attack on democracy because we're overconfident in our democracy. And so I would argue that there's so many similarities happening in our country in state houses, rigging of elections, attack of courts, banning books, regulating protests so that certain groups get arrested for protesting in ways that would have been legal. We don't see it very often. But the look and feel of that event in Youngstown, whatever the arm motion was, it was the weird music at the end. It was the whole scene was so similar to some of the darkest moments in the world history that even though we're slow to see the parallels, that parallel couldn't have been more clear. And we need more wake-up calls because the truth is there are many parallels. There's a reason they're celebrating Orban in Hungary, in Texas. It's because he's figured out how to put into place sort of minority rule in a phony democracy, which is what many of these states are trying to do here. But too many people don't see it because we're not paying attention to that stuff. So I think that one was so stark that people saw it for what it was. And one of the things I'd say about Ohio, and we were talking about this before, what to me is also shocking is the Republican Party of Ohio has long been sort of this establishment moderate. Kasich beat Trump in the Ohio presidential primary. The moderates have been beating the far right. At that rally, the Secretary of State tweeted, "Thank you for your endorsement, Mr. Trump." The Secretary of State of Ohio is excited to get endorsed by the biggest election denier in our country. That's kind of scary. J.D. Vance is humiliated. Trump said he's kissing my you-know-what. The guy comes up on stage afterwards all excited to be with a guy who humiliated him. And the three Republican candidates for the Supreme Court of Ohio participated in whatever that hand-raising ceremony was. Supreme Court justices sitting right now. It's like the full group of these people has And again, the primary is over. They're in the general election, but they can't help themselves but move away from the old sort of Republican to be full-out Trumpsters when the guy is literally up to his ears in this Mar-a-Lago classified information stuff. It's not going very well if you read the latest news, but they still can't help themselves. So the event itself was such a parallel to the darkest moments. And then when you're in Ohio, like you're in Pennsylvania, and you see it's no longer just fringe. It's literally the elected leaders of this state participating that you realize how broken the place is getting. By the way, one little thing to bail Ohioans out a little bit, and you might know this. In Ohio, when you yell out the words in the crowd, OH, everyone says IO. Not in that crowd. A candidate yelled out OH, and the crowd was confused, and they sort of said yay, and they clapped. That was not – there were some Ohioans there clearly, but that's part of this traveling band of Trump acolytes that go everywhere because they didn't even know what the Ohio cheer was. So on the one end, it was kind of a small crowd. But on the flip side, what happened was very dark, very reminiscent of really dark moments, and a lining up of Republican officials basically saying, we don't care what you've done, Trump. We don't care what you say. Even if we're the sitting Secretary of State and 3 Supreme Court justices, we're with you. That's all really scary stuff. And like you said, they're all on the ballot this November. So if we want to send a message that we don't want this garbage in our state, in Pennsylvania and Ohio, we've got a chance to do so.
No, and really all across the country, because this collective insanity is taking control of the Republican Party in ways that, I look at this and, when I was in school, we used to ask questions. How could the German people go along with Hitler, and how could, the Italian people go along with Mussolini? How could these people fall for this stuff? And I'm going, I think I'm finding out.
Absolutely. And you probably had this experience. I'm not talking about people who I've never met. I was on city council and county commission with Pat DeWine, who is now Supreme Court Justice. I saw him when he started his career acting normally, when he took public service seriously. We worked on issues together. Just like our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, before he was that, I was on panels with this guy. We got along fine.
Yeah.
So this is not how these people started.
So let me ask you this then. So the question is, did they convert to true believers, or is this just political expedience?
I think some of them, they literally, LaRose and DeWine in particular, I think initially they thought politics were about being more moderate, and they're seeing that there's no room left. So they move, and now, it's hard to say, are they full believers, are they posers? J.D. Vance is the same trajectory, but either way, because I saw them in their prior sort of existence, personally, I literally was in council meetings with these people on stage, getting along with them. It's even more disturbing to watch it. Now, Pat DeWine is Supreme Court Justice, hand in the air when Trump tells him to do so. This is a guy who 20 years ago would not have acted that way. So to going back to the prior examples in history, when you know the people doing it, it's even worse, and it's harder to explain. But I think it, it was Maya Angelou that once said, courage is the most important character trait by far. Without it, no other character traits matter. And I think what we're seeing is a massive level of spinelessness from people like Rob Portman, J.D. Vance, Pat DeWine, Frank LaRose, all over the country. Mastriano is probably different. He's a true believer. But a lot of these other ones, I think, are just spineless, and they just become cultivated, and then they can never quit. If they ever now were out of a moment of courage in the environment they've allowed to take over, they'd probably lose. And so they're basically full on at this point. And that's why I think the rest of us, we need to say to them, we don't care if you're a true believer like Mastriano or if you're spineless. You're equally dangerous, and we got to get rid of all of you.
Absolutely.
Because the spineless person actually, in some ways, is worse because they give cover. Their brand of being more moderate. Rob Portman's been an example of this. His brand of being more moderate actually prettied up Trumpism. Because Portman, Trump this, Trump that. Trump is borrowing off the brand of people everyone assumes have a better sense, and it's really provided cover for the true Trump takeover of the Republican Party. So all these people who kind of seem to know better, they've actually helped it all happen. And so in some ways, the spineless people are equally or more dangerous than the true believers.
No, I say they're worse.
It all happen.
I say they're worse because they give them legitimacy. You're spot on, right?
Yeah, they legitimize it. And people like Trump know it. Whenever Trump needed covered something, he'd say, well, Rob Portman agrees with me. He took advantage of that, so it does legitimize it. Trump was fringe when he started. Look at him now. They let him in. They let him take over.
Yeah, and I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when they tell you who they are, believe them. They're telling us who they are with the salutes and the rhetoric. So last question I've got for you, because look, we're 49 days away from what a lot of people say could, be one of the last elections we ever get to participate in. Thoughts?
Thoughts is we can win the Senate and we can win the House and we can still lose our democracy. And this gets back to Mastriano. If we win a couple of seats in the Senate, amazing. But if we let election deniers control the elections of this country in Pennsylvania, Arizona, New Mexico, and other states where they are running for Secretary of State, or in Pennsylvania's case, for governor appointing the Secretary of State, we could still lose. So what I'd say to people, of course we need Fetterman and Val Demings and Ryan to win. I think they can, but don't stop there. Obviously, don't let Mastriano win in Pennsylvania. If you're able to help out keeping this Fincham guy winning the Secretary of State's race in Arizona, if we can pick up state house seats in Michigan, Arizona, and flip those, there's a bigger playing field for democracy than Democrats have typically played on. We must play on it. For example, we won the federal races we hoped to win in 20, but we lost the battle for democracy when we didn't pick up any state houses. We have to go deep for Senate. We have to win the House, and those are possible. They're not done. There's a lot of work to do, but we got to go deeper and not let any election deniers anywhere near the election processes of these swing states.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, David, I appreciate you taking time for us, sharing your knowledge and expertise. Look forward to talking to you again.
Take care. Welcome to Ohio soon.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you so much, David Pepper. Make sure you check out his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. We'll get links out on social media. I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the top. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that socialist author Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore, Maryland. A prolific writer, Sinclair wrote nearly 100 books and other publications. Upton Sinclair's father and father's relatives had been wealthy Southerners, but thanks to the Civil War and its aftermath, the family was left in financial ruins. His mother was from a wealthy Episcopalian family and was very strict. Sinclair often stayed with her wealthy parents. These family experiences growing up gave Sinclair an insight into how both the rich and poor lived. Sinclair studied at the City College of New York and for a time at Columbia University. He went on to write several popular novels that explored the experiences of working people in the rapidly industrializing United States. The Flyver King explored the impact of Henry Ford on auto production. Oil focused on the oil industry in Southern California. But Sinclair is best remembered for his classic expose of the Chicago meatpacking industry, The Jungle. The book was fiction, but based in fact. In 1904, he spent 7 weeks working undercover in Chicago's meatpacking plants to get material for the book. The Jungle was published in 1906 and was immediately a bestseller. It was originally published in serial form in a socialist newspaper. Sinclair said that he wrote the novel intending to set forth the breaking of human hearts by a system which exploits the labor of men and women for profit. The novel led to congressional legislation and federal regulation of the meatpacking industry. It helped lead to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours. From Stitcher to Podbean, iTunes, iHeart, all those places. If you got a place where we're not, let us know, and we will make sure that we are there. This story caught my attention today that, again, coming out of the pandemic, we're going to find, and look, I hope there's a committee that goes through and finds every criminal and every one of these people who were lining their pockets during the pandemic. Well, the big story today, the Justice Department charged 47 people with fraud, $240 million. And the case in Minnesota, in our friend state of Minnesota, which is now the largest fraud uncovered during the pandemic, what they were doing, claiming that they were feeding children. Yeah, I figured nobody would pay attention that a second floor apartment building would have 5,000 kids that they were feeding. I guess they didn't think anybody would notice that. And the worst part of it is, the person who was supposed to be overseeing it, the watchdog, well, they were eyeballs deep into it, lining their pockets. And look, the hope is these people don't see the outside again, because this is the kind of stuff where, one, and this is where I'm against this idea of privatization and having people with their hands in the till. This should be done as a matter of government programming where it's audited constantly. But this is what happens when you put a lot of people with their hands in the till. And $240 million, in what we spent in the pandemic isn't a lot, but it's a lot when you're talking about that money could have been really spent on feeding children who were hungry during the pandemic. I mean, I don't know how you sleep at night pulling a scheme like this, but there they are. I don't know how you can do that. But then again, what we saw in the pandemic is you saw people setting up fake unemployment accounts and basically stealing from unemployment and stealing from people who actually needed it. And this is why, again, I think we need stronger oversight. And I'm waiting for that senator, that committee to go, you know what, we're going to start locking these people up. And hopefully all 47 of them get locked up. And their job should then be, while locked up, making sure that those children that they were creating, evidently making up out of thin air, that actual children get fed. But one of the nonprofit groups, Feed Our Future, that was the group that the state of Minnesota looked to as the watchdog to stop fraud, and yet there they were, deep into it. And this is one of those moments where I'm hoping we start paying attention, and we start believing in good governance again. I hear people, my right-wing friends say, well, government can't do anything wrong, right? And then they elect people who prove that. I think good governance is possible. I think governance of we the people is possible. It's not the government, it's our government. We do those things collectively that individually we can't. We can't end childhood poverty and hunger in this country individually. Collectively, we have to do that. Collectively, as a society, we say there should be no children who go to bed hungry. There should be no veteran who sleeps on the street. No one who needs mental health treatment should go without. No one who needs drug and alcohol treatment. Whatever we as a society say, this is a priority, we could be able to do this. But again, we've got an ideological fringe in this country, and sadly, they've taken a main party who says, no, government can't do any of that. We're going to let the private sector do it because they do it so much more efficiently. And then you see stories like this, you go, yeah, they're efficient, all right. They're efficient at ripping us off and not providing the kind of service that we need. So I hope they all go to jail. I hope they spend a lot of time in jail. I hope, I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to go to the next frame. You know where that is, but I'm still kind of hoping for it. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And please make sure you are registered to vote. And then plan to vote. And then do vote. Pretty simple. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
Listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.